In a fiery Capitol Hill exchange, Representative Jasmine Crockett launched a shocking insult at President Donald Trump, calling him an old white Nepo baby in the White House. What happened next left the entire room speechless. Trump, never one to hold back, fired back with brutal humor that instantly silenced Crockett and sent the internet into chaos. Viewers couldn't stop talking about Trump's hilarious yet cutting comeback that flipped the tables live on air. The air inside Capitol Hill was thick with tension. The shutdown that began on October 1st had already furloughed hundreds of thousands of workers, and emotions were running high. Farmers cried out about lost livelihoods. Small businesses were closing their doors, and families watched anxiously as bills piled up. Against this backdrop, cameras turned to Texas Democrat Representative Jasmine Crockett. She leaned into the microphone on MSNBC, her voice sharp with frustration. "I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists," she declared. Her eyes narrowed, and then came the line that froze the entire room. "The old white Nepo baby sitting in the White House is the cause of all this destruction, pain, and suffering." Gasps rippled across the room. The anchor shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard. For a moment, even the studio lights seemed to dim under the weight of her words. Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, was watching closely from the White House. His aides glanced nervously at him, waiting for his reaction. Would he brush it off, or would he strike back? The silence before his response was more powerful than any insult. By the following morning, Crockett's words had gone viral. The clip of her mocking Trump, calling him an old white Nepo baby and comparing him to a child fumbling with phonics, racked up 2 million views within hours. On X, hashtags like #NepoBabyPresident and #TrumpMock trended non-stop. But for millions of Americans struggling through the shutdown, her words felt less like truth and more like a cruel distraction. Farmers in Iowa, factory workers in Ohio, and small-town families across Texas shared their frustration. "We're worried about putting food on the table," one farmer posted. "And all they can do is mock the president." Inside the White House, Trump's team debated furiously. Some urged him to let it slide, fearing more attention would only fuel the controversy. But Trump leaned back in his chair, a small smirk forming. He had been here before: insults, mockery, lies, and each time, he found a way to turn the attack into a moment of strength. "People are hurting," he finally said, breaking the tension. "She thinks this is about me, but it's about them. Time to show her." The room went still. His staff knew Trump was about to strike back. That evening, Trump took the stage at a rally in Dallas, right in Jasmine Crockett's backyard. The arena was packed wall-to-wall, thousands of Americans waving flags, chanting, and holding signs demanding an end to the shutdown. Cameras from every major network were live. He didn't open with his usual greetings. Instead, he went straight to the heart of the matter. "Folks," he began, his voice booming, "you've seen the clip. Jasmine Crockett, the so-called representative from Texas, called me an old white Nepo baby. Can you believe it?" The crowd roared with boos, but Trump raised his hand to quiet them. His expression hardened, and then, just when people expected anger, he delivered a line so sharp, so brutally funny, that the audience erupted in uncontrollable laughter. The insult wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake, it was clever, witty, and devastatingly timed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in on shocked faces. Social media lit up in real time. Even those who didn't support Trump couldn't deny it, the comeback had landed. Jasmine Crockett, watching from her office, looked stunned. She hadn't expected this. And in that moment, America leaned in closer. Within minutes of Trump's Dallas rally speech, the clip of his comeback exploded online. News outlets rushed to replay the moment, but it wasn't the pundits who carried it, it was ordinary Americans. Truck drivers on break, mothers in kitchens, farmers scrolling after work. Everyone was sharing it. Crockett humiliated shot into the top trends alongside #MAGA, #ShutDownTruth, and #SimplerTrump. Even people who admitted they weren't fans couldn't ignore the humor and precision in his response. He didn't just clap back, one viral post read. He buried her in her own hypocrisy. Meanwhile, Crockett's team scrambled. The insult she had thrown, "old white Nepo baby," was now being mocked in reverse. Memes flooded feeds showing Trump standing tall while Crockett fumbled with microphones, captions reading, "Who's the Nepo now?" Inside MSNBC, producers debated whether to replay Crockett's segment. Some worried it was backfiring badly. Others argued controversy was good for ratings. But one staffer whispered what many were already thinking. Trump just flipped the script. She looks smaller now. Crockett herself sat in silence, staring at her phone as the backlash unfolded. The next morning, Capitol Hill buzzed like a hornet's nest. Journalists swarmed hallways, chasing lawmakers for reactions. Some Democrats tried to brush off Trump's rally response as typical bluster, but even their tone carried unease. Republicans, on the other hand, were jubilant. "Did you hear him?" one GOP senator chuckled to reporters. He turned her own words into a weapon. That's classic Trump. Behind closed doors, Democratic aides begged Crockett to avoid cameras, fearing any new comment would only pour fuel on the fire. But Crockett, shaken yet defiant, insisted she wouldn't back down. Still, her eyes betrayed uncertainty. Trump, meanwhile, prepared for another statement, this time from the White House. Advisers encouraged him to focus on the shutdown and appear presidential. But Trump knew the people wanted more than policy. They wanted honesty, humor, and fire. That afternoon, he emerged from the Oval Office and stood at the podium. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward. "You know, folks," he began, "they said I should ignore her. They said don't answer back. But when someone lies about you, lies about America, sometimes you've got to fight." The words shook the room. Trump paused, letting the silence hang. Then, with a smile, he continued. "Jasmine Crockett thinks calling me an old white Nepo baby makes her smart. But here's the truth, I built something. I built businesses. I built jobs. I built an America where families could thrive again. What has she built? Nothing, except a career out of tearing other people down." Gasps filled the press room. It wasn't just a defense, it was a gut punch delivered with calm precision. Across the country, Americans stopped what they were doing. In diners, gas stations, and living rooms, people leaned closer to screens. Some cheered, others teared up. Hearing their frustrations voiced so clearly, social media lit up again. "I don't care what party you're in," one veteran wrote. "This is a man defending not just himself, but all of us who've been mocked and ignored." Another post read, "For the first time in a long time, I feel like someone is speaking for me." Crockett, watching from her office, felt her throat tighten. The room that had once laughed with her was now laughing at her, and America was only getting started. Everyone knew he had already won the public battle. But would he deliver one more strike inside the Capitol itself? As the gavel struck, Trump leaned into the microphone. His voice was steady, but it carried an unmistakable edge. "They say only white supremacists feel safe in this country," he began. "Tell that to the black business owners who thrived under my economy. Tell that to the Hispanic families who saw record low unemployment. Tell that to every minority who got a second chance because of the First Step Act." Gasps filled the room. For a split second, Crockett's expression faltered. She knew this wasn't just a comeback anymore, it was an indictment of her entire narrative. The cameras caught it all. America was watching. Outside, the crowd of journalists erupted as Trump's words hit the airwaves. Clips from the Capitol hearing went viral within minutes, reaching millions across the nation. Hashtags like #WideTruthBomb and #TrumpTurnsTheTables dominated social media. In Texas, Crockett's own district felt the impact. Local radio callers expressed anger. "She doesn't speak for us," one man said. "We're tired of her using race as a shield while ignoring our struggles." Another caller, a single mother, broke down in tears live on air. "I may not have liked Trump before," she said, "but today, I felt heard." Inside Crockett's office, aides scrambled to spin the fallout, but they could barely keep up. Donations slowed to a trickle. Emails flooded in, angry, disappointed, even from longtime supporters. "You went too far," one message read. Mocking him meant mocking us. Meanwhile, Trump's allies celebrated. "This isn't just politics," a senator whispered to a reporter. "This is a movement." Crockett gave him a gift, and he's turning it into a hammer. By evening, even critics admitted Crockett was no longer the attacker, she was the wounded target. That night, Crockett faced her lowest moment yet. Alone in her office, she scrolled through endless clips of Trump's Capitol response. Each one stung worse than the last. His words weren't just cutting her down, they were lifting others up. She replayed her own insult, "old white Nepo baby," and cringed at how hollow it now sounded compared to Trump's defense of farmers, mothers, veterans, and minorities. She had wanted to paint him as selfish, but somehow he had flipped her insult into a story about America itself. Outside her window, chants echoed through the streets, "USA! USA!" Protesters gathered, waving flags and holding signs that read, "We are not mocked, and Trump speaks for us." On social media, Americans shared their personal stories, losses, sacrifices, and small triumphs, tying them to Trump's words. Many admitted they cried while watching him speak. Crockett buried her face in her hands. The fight she thought she could win with mockery had turned into a tidal wave against her. And for Trump, it was only the beginning. The next morning, he struck again, not with humor, but with precision. At a press conference, Trump pulled no punches. "You want to talk about honesty?" he asked, his voice calm but cutting. "Let's talk about Jasmine Crockett's record. Let's talk about her donors, her failures as a prosecutor, her silence when families cried out for justice." He laid out details: campaign cash tied to radical PACs, ethics complaints ignored by the media, and cases she mishandled that left victims without justice. Every fact landed like a blow, shocking the room into silence. Reporters, usually quick to interrupt, had nothing to say. Even rival networks replayed his words unedited. On social media, Americans reacted with disbelief. "Why didn't we know this before?" one post read. Another went viral: "She tried to clown him, and he brought receipts." Crockett's staff watched in horror as hashtags like #CrockettExposed and #FraudFiles trended across platforms. Donors who once supported her quietly backed away, unwilling to be tied to the unraveling scandal. In living rooms across America, ordinary people shook their heads. To them, Trump wasn't just defending himself, he was exposing corruption they had always suspected. As the revelation spread, the emotional weight landed hardest on everyday Americans. A farmer in Iowa who had nearly lost everything during the shutdown broke down during a local interview. Crockett mocked him, he said, his voice cracking. "But when he spoke, it felt like he was standing up for me. I cried watching him defend us." In Ohio, a laid-off federal worker shared her story on the radio. "I felt invisible," she said softly. "Like politicians only remember us when they want votes. But Trump's words reminded me I still matter. I cried at my kitchen table." Clips of these emotional testimonies flooded social media, amplifying the divide. Some mocked the tears, but many more echoed them, admitting they too wept listening to Trump. Even longtime skeptics began to shift. A commentator on a mainstream network reluctantly admitted, "This isn't about policy. It's about connection." Crockett used insult. Trump used heart, and the country felt it. Meanwhile, Crockett sat in silence, scrolling through endless videos of ordinary Americans crying as they told their stories. Each one was another reminder her insult had cut the wrong people. That evening, Trump appeared once more, this time at another rally, his voice steady but energized. "They call me an old white Nepo baby," he said with a grin. "But folks, I'd rather be called that 1,000 times than stand silent while hard-working Americans suffer." The crowd roared, waving flags and chanting, "USA! USA!" Trump raised his hand for silence and delivered the knockout line. "Crockett doesn't just insult me, she insults every one of you. And I'll never stop standing up for you, no matter what names they throw. The arena shook with thunderous applause. Tears streamed down faces as families embraced. Veterans saluted. Children waved hand-painted signs. Online, the moment spread like wildfire. "This is history," one user posted. Another wrote, "He turned her insult into America's anthem." Meanwhile, Crockett's office was eerily quiet. Phones rang with angry constituents while allies kept their distance. She stared blankly at the TV, watching Trump's crowd erupt in joy and tears, realizing her attack had built his strongest moment yet. America, divided but captivated, leaned in closer, knowing the clash was far from over. By morning, Crockett's team scrambled to regain control. They drafted statements, pitched interviews, and called in favors from friendly networks. "We need to flip this back on Trump," one aide insisted, his voice cracking with desperation. But every attempt backfired. When Crockett appeared on a local station to repeat her claim that Trump was a Nepo baby, the anchor pressed her about the ethics complaints and donor scandals now trending online. She stuttered, dodged, and changed the subject, but the clip went viral anyway. "Look at her squirm," one farmer posted on X. She had all the confidence to mock him, but none to answer real questions. Even some of her allies quietly distanced themselves. A Democratic strategist told a reporter off the record. She gave him the biggest political gift of the shutdown, and he's milking it. Meanwhile, Trump's Dallas rally footage continued to surge online, hitting millions of views. The chants of USA, USA echoed through every feed. Crockett's voice had grown smaller, drowned out by a wave she couldn't stop. For the first time, she felt what Trump had promised, the lesson she never saw coming. Across the nation, something unusual happened. Ordinary Americans, not politicians, began shaping the conversation. Veterans posted videos praising Trump's defense of them. Mothers recorded tearful testimonies about struggling through the shutdown but finding hope in his words. Farmers, with dirt still on their hands, spoke into their phones about how Crockett's insult felt like a slap in the face. One video in particular went viral, a little girl in Iowa holding a sign that read, "President Trump, thank you for standing up for my daddy." Her father, a farmer, stood behind her, wiping tears from his eyes. Networks couldn't ignore it. The human side of the story overtook the political bickering. Analysts admitted the tide of emotion was overwhelming. "This isn't just a fight between Trump and Crockett," one anchor said. "This is America weighing in." Trump himself reposted dozens of these clips, captioning one with, "This is why I fight, for them, for you." Crockett watched in silence, realizing her insult had ignited a storm far bigger than she ever intended. The people had chosen sides, and she was losing theirs. That evening, Trump stood once more at the White House podium. His tone was lighter this time, but the sting was sharper. "Jasmine Crockett says I can't pronounce names," he said, smirking. "Folks, I've built skyscrapers, signed deals with world leaders, and made peace in the Middle East. I think I can handle a few names, except maybe hers, because it sounds a lot like crooked." The room burst into laughter. Even some journalists couldn't suppress grins. Online, memes exploded with the phrase #crooked Crockett. Then Trump's voice grew serious. "It's not about me. It's about the farmers she mocked, the family she ignored, the workers she laughed at. You are not forgotten. You will never be forgotten while I am your president." Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers, tears streaming down faces as chants of "We love Trump" filled the air. Crockett, watching from her office, felt the walls closing in. What began as a jab had turned into a national reckoning. Trump hadn't just silenced her, he had transformed her insult into a rallying cry for millions. By now, Jasmine Crockett was running on fumes. The calls pouring into her office weren't from supporters, but from furious constituents demanding answers. Her staff whispered about donors who had gone silent, allies who had vanished, and reporters who no longer returned calls. That evening, Crockett sat for a live interview, hoping to steady her image. But halfway through, the host asked bluntly, "Representative, do you regret calling the president an old white Nepo baby, considering the backlash?" For a moment, the cameras caught her face stiffen. She forced a laugh, but her eyes betrayed panic. The clip spread within minutes. Hashtags like #CrockettCracks and #NotSorryButScared trended worldwide. On X, users posted side-by-side videos, Trump commanding roaring crowds while Crockett fumbled through excuses. The contrast was devastating. One headline captured the mood perfectly. Crockett tried to humiliate Trump, instead, she humiliated herself. And as night fell, even some Democrats privately admitted the truth, she had become the liability no one wanted to defend. Across America, the energy only grew. Trump supporters, already fired up, rallied harder than ever. In Pennsylvania, thousands gathered spontaneously outside a federal building, chanting, "We stand with Trump," while holding handwritten signs. In Florida, Cuban immigrants waved flags shouting, "He fights for us." What struck the media most was the diversity of the crowds: Black families, Hispanic business owners, Asian veterans, rural farmers, and truck drivers, standing side by side. The message was clear: this wasn't just Trump versus Crockett. This was America standing against the insult. A viral video showed an elderly veteran wiping tears as he saluted a giant American flag. "I served under many presidents," he said, his voice trembling, "but I've never seen one fight back for us like Trump does." Even critics began to acknowledge something powerful was happening. This is no longer just political theater, one analyst admitted. It's become an emotional reckoning. Meanwhile, Crockett stayed silent, her office lights dimmed, watching her own insult transform into the strongest weapon against her. On October 8, President Trump stepped before the cameras once more, not at a rally, but inside the White House. His words carried both fire and compassion. "America, you saw what happened. They called me names. They mocked me. But I don't care about me, I care about you. The farmers, the families, the workers hurt by this shutdown. You are my fight." His voice cracked with emotion as he recounted letters from children whose parents lost jobs during the shutdown. Holding one up, he read aloud. "Dear President Trump, my mommy says we can't pay the bills, but she says you are trying to help. Please don't give up." The room fell silent. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's face as he paused, visibly moved. "To that little girl, and to every American family, I will never give up." Millions watched live, and many cried openly. Online, the clip exploded. It became the defining moment of his presidency. And Jasmine Crockett, she vanished from the conversation. Even her critics admitted she had been silenced, not by Trump's insults, but by his humanity. Capitol Hill had never been this quiet.